Good day everyone and welcome to another vlog for the Exodus 7 to 12 KJV project. That name is very long. Now this little video that you're seeing right now is for a brand new tutorial. Actually it's about two brand new tutorials. One is about the caustic light that you can see here in the water, and the other is about the ripple effect on an uneven water surface. However, I do also include a section in that video about the ripples on how to do a very simple one. So this is just what I'm opening on. Felt led to do that. And I think this is absolutely awesome. This was the initial experimentation video where God helped me sort out some issues with the method. One simple example that comes to mind right now is if you have multiple ripples in one area, you need to make sure that their positive values are different. Otherwise, you get that intersection with the faces directly on top of each other and you get a lot of noise. And I mean a lot of noise. So you can see that there's a little bit of a line that comes in. Let me just see if I can find a spot where it's. Here we go. There you can see it. I'll make sure I zoom in the edit to show you guys, but there you can see a little line there. Always important to make sure that you understand little issues like that. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Totally dependent on the Holy Spirit to help me get through these kinds of things. I want to show you guys how low the resolution was for the first test. Especially over here. Look at that. Looks like steps. It's not horrible. It's really not horrible, but yeah. Let's just say it needed a little bit of refinement. And this, which I'll also be zooming in the edit, is what the caustics look like without any water over it. It's really a cloud texture that's set to hard and has a few depth adjustments, but it really looks amazing. Now this one, the main movement for the caustics was on the Z-axis, but this was purely to get the test for the speed 100%. I think this was also for the video that I just showed you guys to make sure that the speed was not running off the charts. So let's get to the tutorials examples. This is the actual tutorial from that's uploaded already. So I'm just going to click through and show you the examples. I'm just going to skip all the way through just to show you guys this one. Here we go. Interestingly, I found two different situations. In this one, I had to reverse the compositing so that the caustic layer would be the one determining transparency and be on top. I also did not switch the faces in this one, but for an example coming up, I had to switch the faces. But I don't want to spoil what the example is. Yeah, it's just going to run a few times just to make sure that whoever watches it gets a chance to really see it. This was the one that's more geared to 2D. As you can see, I removed a lot of the depth. And here is the surprise. Look at that. It's Moses. He's swimming. It's awesome. Now for this, all I had to do was change his outfit, but I had a problem with the middle section. In this area over here, he wears a sash-like belt, which you can also see over here. But in the original model, my focus was just to get this part looking right. So the part over here is really folded and uneven and really ugly. So I had to modify his cloak or dress or whatever you want to call it to get that belt back and make it look neat. I also shortened it to represent more like something you would wear on a hot day. You know, let's say if you were still in Pharaoh's house or whatever the case might be. Now, this is not the truth, because this is not something that's, you know, necessarily out of scripture, because there's no record of him swimming. That doesn't mean he didn't. But that does mean that we would not necessarily know what attire would be appropriate for swimming in their day. So, yeah. But as you can see, slightly his hair does move as he moves. So just skip back a little bit. You can see a little bit over there. I also made his outfit move a little bit, but obviously it's not moving enough for you to really notice it. But I really, really like the example. It's really awesome. Now this is another tutorial about water ripples, which is the one I told you guys about earlier with that specific example. But I want you to notice something that I didn't. Let me just turn that down. Something I didn't mention is that if you really want these ripples to distort, and I mean like really distort properly as Suzanne moves, you're going to need to adjust your slope parent to be a lot bigger. Not necessarily, you know, ridiculous, but you can adjust it to be bigger. I want to show you in the tutorial how it moves in the viewport versus what you just saw, so that you can understand why I say I think it's better that if you want a better movement that you increase it. Yeah, here we go. See, look at that. See, that's more appropriate for the speed she was moving at. And the only way to get that is by making the slope parent larger. So that's just a heads up to you guys. So you can see the tutorial result, and it's going to switch to the other one. Just give it a second. Here we go. And sink down. Boom. Love it. Absolutely awesome. And this was actually the first test run for this tutorial. God, it's so awesome. What I really wanted was for the ripples to vanish, but in an outward fashion, as if these outside ripples were the last ones. And of course, the last example, uneven surface. Now I slowed the animation down here because 30 frames per second were way too much for this animation. It looked fine in the viewport, and the timing looked fine in the viewport, but when I rendered it out, it moved way too fast. There are a few things I would have changed concerning this, but as a tutorial, you have to, at some point, just say pencils down, you know. You can't just go nuts with it, so that's the example. Now, what I do want to show you guys is how this would apply to the Exodus project, because it is absolutely relevant. So I'm going to close this, and no, I'm not going to close this. I'm going to close this and quickly show you how this applies to Moses. Okay, now we have Moses in. Okay, here will be our ocean. So let's call this Nile, because that's what it's supposed to represent. Now, in this case, we have two options. We can use a flat surface with normal textures, or we can, for more close-up scenes, use the ocean modifier instead, which is something I would really prefer to do. So let's say he's standing about this deep. That's the most it's going to rush today, so let's just work with that. Fantastic. So let's give him a circle. Let me just get a circle. There we go. From the top, extrude it out, just like in the tutorial. Now for the fun part. Waves. Oh yeah. Let's give it some subdivision. I usually use about 3. And of course, waves first. Give a material. And let's do the waves. Quite narrow. Quite high. Okay, let's do our weight painting. Let's go back to object and let's set our weight. We also need to set a weight for it to pull in. And this was not included in the tutorial, not on purpose. I mean, God just showed me this, is that we're standing here, and if the ripples go like this with the water going that way, it's just not going to be realistic. The ripples need to pull to the side that the water is rushing in. So it needs to go that way. Just want to make it more aligned. There we go. And you see that is more effective. This is way too fast. Let's go for 0.1 and see what that looks like. I just want to hide this quickly. It's really distracting. Yeah, it's still way too fast. Let's go for 0.05 and see what that looks like. That is freaking insane. Let's give it a good offset. Ah, see, that's much better. Okay, now I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that. Now, I don't want to apply the scale of this. I would rather make the scale of our object that's going to be sticking to it the same. It's a much better method. Uh, 1.263 for X and Y. 1.263, 1.263, and the Z is 1.569. 1.569, okay. Now we can make it a hook. We can add a hook to it. Sorry, wrong object. Pull weight. God just showed me the most awesome technique. I'm going to show you guys this right now. I just want to make a note of it. So let's just quickly paint this thing. Okay, that's fantastic. Go back to the hook modifier, which was again placed on the wrong thing. Add the hook modifier to the ripples and select the cube. And of course the correct weight, which is the pull weight. And it does need to be a slow parent. So let's just make it a slow parent. Let's make this 10. I found 10 to be a very cool amount. And we're going to have to add an object for it to be parented to, so that we can determine direction. So since the water is pulling this way, I'm going to copy the X and Y location of his position, specifically this. I don't want to go for the root bone. I'd rather go for the X and Y position of his middle section. I think that'll be the most appropriate, at least for now. So let's go copy constraint, copy location. Let's select his rig, if it allows me to select the rig. Okay, it does. I want to go for the, is there a waist? Let's try middle. Let's see what it's called. I'm wasting time doing this. It is called root. But isn't this one called root? No, that's called master. Oh, my bad. Okay, never mind. Where's my plane? Let's go root and offset, and only the X and Y. Like that. Needs to be nice and centered according to the slow parent. And then we need to copy a location constraint for the slow parent. And that is way too intense. Oh goodness. What I want to try is to reduce the strength first to something like that. I think that's better. So you have something like this. Now, let's say you want to move Moses around. Oh gosh, I haven't fixed him to Moses yet. So that, again, as I said before, if you move Moses, that happens. And if you rotate him, you can see the ripples stay in the position where it's supposed to be. Now, the only thing I would change in this case is the method for sticking it to the plane. I would much rather it be slow parented to the plane instead of the ripples. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to say object, and I'm going to move it back this way so that it wrinkles all the way up there. And I'm going to still be using slow parent and about a 10. So let's look at this. Yeah, you see, that makes sense. Anyway, so that is very cool. Now let's make sure that he reacts to the water itself. Let's just mute this plane. Okay, that looks great. And now let's make this stick to the Nile. What did I do with the Nile anyway? Oh, I just turned it off. Okay, that's great. Now, at the very last, after the hook modifier, we add what is known as a shrink wrap modifier. Stick it to the ocean, give it a positive offset. Very important to note that it's a positive offset. And let's just hit play on that. Okay, now our waves do need more height because we're obviously getting a very weird reaction over here. Let's keep our waves high and reduce the outside. Let's look at that. Okay, that's a lot more effective. Let's scale it on the z-axis. See, it's getting messy the more we scale it like that. So I think I'm going to be doing more of this sort of thing. Something along those lines. Let's see what that looks like. See, that's much better. Let's just pull it down. Not a lot, just a smidge. Just so we get a good amount of breakup. Want a little bit more breakup. There we go. Now let's see, move them back and forth. And you can turn around. And the direction will remain exactly the way it's supposed to be. And let's say it goes upstream. And it goes downstream. And it goes upstream. Fully rigged. So I just would suggest, if you're going to bake this, to make sure that you increase the resolution a bit more. I think 5 would be great if I were to just render this out with a solid surface on the water. So I'm going to do that quickly just to see what it looks like. And this thing needs some variety. That looks amazing. Okay, it's not the shadelessness that's the problem. It's freestyle adding these weird little lines in here. Okay, that's interesting. That means I can keep the shadows. Woohoo! That's awesome. So that is it for Moses for this week. So I'm going to be closing this. Something wrong with his eyes. I think the masks are actually outlined. Looks like he's got some weird mascara on or something. Okay, let's close that. Now, one thing I also worked on this week were the magicians. I say one thing because there are 4 magicians and I only pretty much worked on the magicians in terms of characters. So this was the first one, and I found it kind of funny to give him a pose with a baffled expression because after they tried to make, not frogs, I think it was making the frogs come up out of the water. I have to go double check it. They said that they couldn't do it, but that it was the finger of God. So they were baffled at one point. So this is the look I went for. Now, I also used Make Human. I remember I told you guys last week that I was going to be switching to the new Make Human that I felt late to. And I did make the switch. I installed the add-ons that were necessary for Blender to be able to use the MHX2 format. And the rig is slightly better. You get an extra bone in the neck. So the neck actually has a bone here, and you have the head movement as well. The shoulders are changed to only have a single bone, but it's not a bad thing. It really moves exceptionally well. And I used the muscle topology for this one. So I'm very satisfied with this. Also, you get the additional assets. Now, this is the ponytail asset, which I'm still kind of on the fence about keeping or not keeping. We'll see. I did find a lot of hieroglyphics references, which I've started tracing. The ones I'm allowed to trace. Let me just make emphasis on that. The research shows that pretty much every wall was just covered in hieroglyphics, any royal wall at least. So this was the first magician. This was an additional surprise type pose. This was another magician. As you can see, I just changed the faces, and some of the body traits I changed a small amount. Another magician, changed the face. Another magician, changed the face. And that was just a cool pose with one. So these are the 4 magicians. As you can see, their faces differ enough so that you can actually see a difference if they stand next to each other. I initially wanted to make their skirts like pure black. Going for black was the plan, but unfortunately it's not accurate, number one. And number two, I don't have peace about doing that. So these are the magicians. If you were wondering about these backgrounds, they were done with procedural textures. It's just a blend texture and a cloud texture on the world. So I'm going to be ending on this frame with Moses swimming. And I'm going to say that I hope to get a lot more done this week in terms of the project itself. I believe God has shown me how to create the fire for the lightning striking the fields for the fire running along upon the ground. So the goal is to try and test that out later. But for the moment, this is it. Have a great one and God bless.